New at 5:30, newly declassified videos are shedding light on the government's secret UFO program.
Here is the Navy's video of one of those sightings happening off the coast right here in San Diego. 10 News reporter Travis Rice has the pilot who saw it and what aviation experts are saying.
It's an object that still bears explaining more than a decade later.
It's rotating.
A school bus-sized something 100 miles off San Diego's coast.
I have never seen anything in my life that had the performance, the acceleration. Keep in mind, this thing had no wings.
Commander David Fravor was piloting an F-18 on a training mission that day in 2004.
And it's moving around left, right, forward, back. The radar immediately starts getting jammed. All of a sudden, it takes off.
I think it's everybody's dream, you know, that there are some sort of aliens.
Jim Kidrick is a retired Navy pilot with more than 40 years in the air.
You think it's legit?
Well, you know, it's hard to tell. The whole topic of UFOs is a very, very unique one.
The veteran remembers his own encounter.
And it was a bright light, and it seemed to be co-altitude, to the point where I actually asked LA Center, I said, you know, I'm seeing something ahead of me. Do you have anything on your radar that I should be aware of? And he said, nope, I'm not seeing anything.
He held off filing a UFO report, and it turned out to be a launch test from a nearby base.
Bright lights and things that happen oftentimes transmit themselves depending on the climactic conditions.
Kidrick says he's lucky there's an answer for what he saw, but says it's different for the pilots from this video.
Do I believe they think they saw something?
This airman's a believer with a catch.
I'm going to say absolutely I would believe that they think they saw something.
Travis Rice, 10 News.
As it takes off, that's the weirdest part about it.
The speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's such a credible source, too.
And Jim Kidrick, straight up source.
No doubt.
So we'll keep watching that one.
Thing one tonight, the U.S. military has been investigating UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and weirdly, no one seems to be too worked up about it. The remarkable admission by the Pentagon came as a result of reporting by the New York Times, pretty august publication, which published a story of the mysterious UFO program over the weekend. In response to questions from the Times, Pentagon officials this month acknowledged the existence of the program, insisting that the effort had ended after 5 years back in 2012. But the former head of that program, Luis Elizondo, told the Times the UF program never shut down, and a successor was appointed after he resigned in October. So what did they find? Quote, the program collected video and audio recordings of reported UFO incidents, including footage from a Navy F-18 Super Hornet showing an aircraft surrounded by some kind of glowing aura, traveling at high speeds and rotating as it moves. The Navy pilots can be heard trying to understand what they're seeing. There's a whole fleet of them, one exclaims. So, if you think it's nuts that we held the news of an official UFO investigation all the way to Thing 1, you're going to love that we have the official video of a UFO in Thing 2 in 60 seconds. So, no big deal, but the Pentagon has confirmed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a $22 million initiative that studied UFOs for at least 5 years, beginning in 2007, and they released video, including a 2004 encounter when two fighter jets chased an oval-shaped white object near San Diego. They also released a second video with cockpit audio as pilots describe what they're seeing. The Pentagon declined to give a date or location.
Dude, there's a drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 100. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like anything, it's rotating.
Now for something rather different. The US Defense Department has acknowledged running a secret multi-million-dollar program to investigate unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. The New York Times says the program was launched 10 years ago at the request of a former and senior Democratic Senator Harry Reid. The Pentagon has confirmed that the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program ended in 2012. But is it continuing under another guise within the vast universe of the US defense establishment? Well, we can speak now to Nick Pope, former UFO investigator for the British Ministry of Defence. He's on webcam from California. Nick, thanks for joining us on BBC World News. Does this have the ring of truth to you?
Yes, absolutely. This program definitely took place. In one sense, it's not surprising that the US government was investigating UFOs. The real story, I think, is the fact that they had denied it so vehemently for so many years.
It seems that a lot of the work took place within a private company, this company that was run by billionaire Robert Bigelow, who's still very involved in space.
Yes, that's a classic tool within the intelligence community to make things like congressional scrutiny and Freedom of Information Act requests more difficult. And effectively, it takes it outside of the scope of freedom of information altogether. And indeed, we did a similar thing in the Ministry of Defense with a classified intelligence study that we did on the UFO mystery. So again, that part of it I can well understand.
If they'd found anything, would they tell us?
No, almost certainly not. This thing was highly classified, very deeply compartmentalized, and one of the reasons why there may have been all these denials that the US government was looking at this phenomenon at all was that most of the rest of the government probably didn't know. I mean, that's always the way with these highly classified projects.
What's your view? Is there any kind of smoking gun here? I mean, it all seems rather fantastical, but you know, it's possible.
Yes, indeed. I mean, now, the vast majority of these things, the sightings that they'll have looked at, will turn out to be misidentifications of things like drones and atmospheric weather phenomena. But, you know, the skeptics have to be right every day. The believers only have to be right once. And clearly the government was doing, I think, a proper thing, taking a look at these things going on in its airspace. And there are some fascinating gun camera footage beginning to emerge as a result of this story, where jet aircraft have chased these things, whatever they are.
Now, the man whom the New York Times names as running this program, Luis Elizondo, says to the New York Times that the effort continued unofficially and he had a successor. Do you think it's likely that investigations like this do still go on?
Yes, absolutely. Even though the funding plug seems to have been pulled, all the things that governments need to investigate UFOs, the radar systems, the imagery analysis, expertise and computer processing power, all that exists anyway as part of the wider defense network. So you can actually, if you kind of massage the figures and say that there's no additional cost to this because the resources are already there, you can continue the program on a sort of quasi-official basis. And that, I'm sure, is what's happening.
Nick Pope, former investigator for the Ministry of Defense. Fascinating stuff, and thank you for speaking to us.
Yeah, when there was two of us, 2 airplanes, 4 people. We had F-18Fs. We had got vectored out to the west after they terminated a training exercise to investigate an object. When we arrived, the cruiser with the Aegis system told us it was merge plot, which means they couldn't break us out from the blip. We started looking around, and as we both looked out the right side of our airplane, we saw a disturbance in the water, i.e. like a seamount where the waves are breaking over the top, so whitewater, and a white object, oblong, pointing north, moving erratically left, right, north, south, up, down, all around. As we started a clockwise flow around the disturbance, watching it, I decided that I would go lower and the other jet stayed high to observe both of us. As I got to about the 12 o'clock position, the object started to mirror us, so now we're both in a clockwise flow, opposite circles. The object is lower than me, I'm above him, and I'm looking at him with my eyes. We get all the way around the circle as I'm descending, so now there's probably about maybe a 2,000 to 3,000 foot difference between us in vertical. And I'm at about the 8 o'clock position, and the tic-tac is at about 2. I cut across the circle, so across the middle, and as I got close to it, probably within a mile to a half mile, it rapidly accelerated to the south and disappeared in less than 2 seconds. So then we turned back around. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I mean, I guess you're an experienced pilot. You've been up in the air a lot. I imagine you've seen a lot of things in the sky. What was it about the movement of this or the appearance of this that made you believe it wasn't from this world as opposed to something else?
Well, the first thing is it had no wings, so you think, okay, it's a helicopter. Well, there's no rotor wash in the water. There's no rotors. And when helicopters move side to side, they kind of slow and then they pick up speed going the other way. This was extremely abrupt, like a ping pong ball bouncing off a wall. It would hit and go the other way and change directions at will. And then the ability to hover over the water and then start a vertical climb from basically 0 up towards about 12,000 feet and then accelerate in less than 2 seconds and disappear is something I had never seen in my life.
Now listen, I'm sure you've spoken to people, you told the story to some people who react with skepticism, shake their heads a bit.
Yes.
What do you say to people who doubt the account?
Well, I think it's easy to doubt what we can't explain, but when you actually see things, and this is not the first account of someone seeing a UFO, but in this situation, you're talking about 4 people, all eyeballs on, ranging in experience from relatively new in a fleet squadron, which is VFA 41, to myself, who had over 16 years of flying and well over 3,500 hours nonstop. So I would argue that it wasn't a weather balloon, it wasn't a flare, it was an actual object that we looked at for somewhere around 5 minutes before it rapidly accelerated.
Everybody stand by. There's more breaking news we're following. We're also learning about a secretive military program. Why did American taxpayers fund research into UFOs to the tune of $22 million? A secretive federal program designed to track unidentified flying objects is facing new scrutiny tonight. We're learning fresh details about the now-defunct initiative, which some officials deem a national security priority, others a massive waste of taxpayer money. Brian Todd is joining us here in the Situation Room with more. Brian, what are you learning?
Wolf, a short time ago, former U.S. Senator Harry Reid, the driving force behind this controversial program, defended it to CNN, saying it was groundbreaking. But we have learned Senator Reid was persuaded to push this program by a longtime friend who had donated to his campaigns, a man who says he believes in UFOs and aliens. Commander David Fravor still can't explain what he says he saw that day. November 2004, the Navy fighter pilot was on a training mission west of San Diego when he was ordered to check out something in the water not far away. On a clear day, over a smooth ocean, he saw the object, waves breaking over it, and says he saw something hovering above it.
It's randomly moving north, south, east, west, just random, just stopping, going the other direction, like you could do with a helicopter, but a little bit more abrupt. It looks like a 40-foot-long tic-tac with no wings.
Fravor says he and his 4-man team tracked the object for several minutes until it just disappeared. Tonight, CNN has learned the Pentagon had a secretive program to research UFOs like the one Fravor spotted. The project was called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, run by an official named Luis Elizondo.
I think this is a national security imperative. We have clear things that we do not understand how they work, operating in areas that we can't control.
A defense official tells CNN the program cost at least $22 million over 5 years before it was shut down in 2012. According to the New York Times and Politico, which first reported this story, tens of millions of dollars for the project were pushed through by former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Those publications say a lot of the money for the Pentagon UFO program went to a company called Bigelow Aerospace, run by a longtime friend of Reid's, Robert Bigelow, a big believer in UFOs. Public records show Bigelow contributed about $20,000 to Reid and his Political Action Committee.
That campaign contributor got research contracts from this program. That just is a bad picture. It doesn't look good for anybody. It's hard to imagine that something that came about that way and profited somebody who pushed for the program was a good use of taxpayer money.
A Pentagon spokesman, in fact, told CNN the program was shuttered because there were, quote, other higher priority issues that merited funding.
It's definitely crazy to spend $22 million to research UFOs. Pilots are always going to see things that they can't identify, and we should probably look into them. But to identify them as UFOs, to target UFOs to research, that is not the priority we have as a national security matter right now.
But pilots like Fravor, who says he saw something, see merits in the program.
What if it is real? Because I think it's real because I saw it. And what if there's more of these? And what if we do nothing?
Now, just a short time ago, Senator Reid responded to CNN, saying he's, quote, proud of this program and its groundbreaking studies. Speak for themselves, he says. Reid says it's silly and counterproductive to politicize the serious questions raised by the work of the UFO program. The head of that aerospace firm, Robert Bigelow, did not respond to CNN's multiple requests for comment by our deadline. Wolf?
Brian, there's also information that former Senator Reid tried to keep information about this entire program out of public view.
That's right, Wolf. The New York Times says Reid acknowledged to them that he and two other senators, Ted Stevens and Daniel Inouye, both deceased, did not want public debate on the Senate floor over this program. Reid told the Times that the funding for the project was so-called black money, meaning that was secret money for classified programs. They just didn't want it talked about.
Brian Todd reporting for us. Brian, thank you.
Finally, proof they do exist. In a striking expose published over the weekend, the New York Times revealed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a $22 million backroom Defense Department effort to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects and alien technology. Here's what Luis Elizondo, the former Pentagon official who led the program, told our own Aaron Burnett last night.
These aircraft, we'll call them aircraft, are displaying characteristics that are not currently within the U.S. inventory nor in any foreign inventory that we are aware of. I can't speak on behalf of the government. Obviously, I'm not in the U.S. government anymore. My personal belief is that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
So is this going to end more like Close Encounters of the Third Kind or Independence Day? Leslie Kane, one of the investigative reporters who broke this story and the author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record, is here to discuss. Leslie, this report is stunning. As you were investigating and writing it, what was the most shocking thing you came across?
Well, gosh, shocking. I don't know. I mean, I think the most important thing about the story is the fact that it is now documented, and the Pentagon has acknowledged that the department has been involved in investigating these unidentified aerial phenomena for quite a while. And that's now established. So that alone is a very important aspect of what's come out in the story. And the conclusions of Mr. Elizondo, some of which you played, are, of course, really incredible. He's the one that should know. He's the one that's been studying these things.
Yes, we don't have to pretend it was a conspiracy anymore. So let's talk about alloys. That's right. The New York Times asserted, quote, under Mr. Bigelow's direction, the company modified buildings in Las Vegas for the storage of metal alloys and other materials that Mr. Elizondo and program contractors said had been recovering from unidentified aerial phenomena. What exactly, in your reading of that, what do you think that means? What did they find? What were they storing?
I mean, I have the same questions, and you know, I wish I knew more about that. I've been told from we've been told from sources that are absolutely reliable that in fact these materials do exist, but we don't know where they are. We don't know who's been working with them. We just know that they exist, and that's something that we want to find out more about. That's all I can tell you right now.
What? Wow. Okay. So
it's amazing. Yeah.
No, it really is. It really is. Guys, let me go to you. Stay right there, Leslie.
Our final story today. It's a little out there, and I do mean out there. The New York Times breaking the news that the Pentagon has been secretly researching the possible existence of UFOs. Apparently, the Department of Defense launched the program in cooperation with former Senator Harry Reid in 2007, and it spent $22 million each year searching for unidentified flying objects until the program was shuttered back in 2012. Joining us now to talk more about this, one of the authors of yesterday's fascinating New York Times article, journalist Ralph Blumenthal. Ralph, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Talk to me about the research that went into this article.
Okay, first of all, it was not $22 million a year. It was $22 million total, which is really a drop in the bucket of the Pentagon budget. But it went for research into these objects, and no one knows what they are to this day, that have been seen by Navy planes. They've engaged with them. They've been reported by witnesses. But beyond that, we really don't know much. And the research went into trying to identify their strange means of propulsion, their phenomenal aerodynamics, which represent nothing on the face of this earth by any country. And the research, even though the program was officially, it ran out of money in 2012, it really has continued, we found out.
So what's been going on, and why have they not publicized the fact that it has continued?
Well, it's a controversial program. A lot of people, there's a ridicule factor. A lot of people are afraid of, you know, the people would make fun of the government spending this money, as has already happened in other media.
But there's also a lot of fascination.
There is fascination. This is probably the most watched and looked at story the New York Times has run in a long time because people are fascinated by the subject.
Yeah, so what are they finding? Have they found anything so far?
Well, they have confirmed, in effect, for the first time that these things exist according to what the program said, that they have established a kind of reality to these objects that didn't exist before, that the government was standing behind, or at least this unit of the Pentagon. They have, as we reported in the paper, some material from these objects that is being studied so that scientists can try to figure out what accounts for their amazing properties, this technology, these objects, whatever they are. So they have made some progress.
What type of material?
They don't know. They're studying it, but it's some kind of compound that they don't recognize.
So, a lot of questions still. Not a lot of answers.
More questions than answers.
As we always have with UFOs.
Progress.
Yeah, but it really is fascinating stuff. Despite the fact that there is ridicule that comes along with
it'll take some attention away from the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Out front now, the former Pentagon military official who ran the covert government program up until this last November, Luis Elizondo. Luis, thank you so much for your time tonight. I mean, first, tell us what the purpose of the program was and why it was so secretive.
Sure. The purpose of the program, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was really designed to do just that. From a national security perspective, identify those things that we see, whether we see them electro-optically, we see them with radar, we see them as eyewitness reports, through a myriad of different ways and avenues that we receive the information, and try to ascertain and determine if that information is a potential threat to national security, in a nutshell.
So what did you find?
Well, we found a lot. I think it's probably been a little bit mischaracterized in some of the social media you see and what people put out, because a lot of times when we don't have a lot of information, we tend to fill in those gaps with what we think is logical. And there's still, by the way, a lot we really don't know. I think what's important is that we have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft. Let's call them aircraft. Things that don't have any obvious flight surfaces, any obvious forms of propulsion, and maneuvering in ways that include extreme maneuverability beyond, I would submit, the healthy G-forces of a human or anything biological, hypersonic velocities, low observability, positive lift, again, seemingly in defying the laws of aerodynamics. So people
so do
are
you
talking.
Think, I mean, I know, but do you believe, when you get that Navy pilot saying what he said, do you think that was, a UFO? To obviously, I don't have any other word to use, or that, or something else?
Sure, that's a great question. Keeping in mind, it's not just the pilot's testimony on an observation. Sure, when someone comes to you who's in charge of a multi-million-dollar weapon platform, who maintains a top secret security clearance, who is paid and trusted by this country to go fight wars and to fly over cities with live munitions, and by the way, they're trained observers with millions of dollars invested in their training.
Yep.
I would submit to you it's pretty compelling. But on top of that, it's not just the eyewitness testimony. It is actual electro-optical data and radar returns. It's also people like radar operators and air traffic controllers. So I think the discussion should be maybe a little bit broader than that. I think people are focusing just on 2 videos coming from a set of F-18s when really it's a lot more than that.
So recently, I guess it was in October, astronomers spotted what they say could be the first interstellar asteroid. You see it there, kind of that strange shape from beyond the solar system. What do you see when you look at that?
Well, Ms. Burnett, I have to admit to you, when I ran this program, I was fundamentally looking at, my colleagues looking at 2 things.
Yeah.
What is it and how does it work? We have deliberately stayed away from going down the rabbit hole of who's behind the wheel and what are their intentions.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have a lot of feelings towards that and are very emotional about that. And what I wanted to do is to allow the data to speak for itself and then use that data to inform leadership, senior DoD leadership, about the potential threat that these type of technologies pose to national security, especially over any type of controlled airspace that we might have. So I'm not trying to be evasive in any way or vague with your answer, but
yeah. Well,
I think there's a lot of possibilities.
Look, and I know you think it's important. I know you think that the government didn't take the threat seriously enough. So let me just ask you point blank the question. Do you believe that life from somewhere else, while you ran this program, came here, visited, observed?
I will tell you unequivocally that through the observation, scientific methodologies that were applied to look at this phenomena, that these aircraft, we'll call them aircraft, are displaying characteristics that are not currently within the U.S. inventory nor in any foreign inventory that we are aware of.
So I know you're being clear, but I mean, the answer is yes.
I can't speak on behalf of the government. Obviously, I'm not in the U.S. government anymore. My personal belief is that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.